Not there, yeah, I think we're there.
We meet again.
Hello, Karen.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Kind of juggling all these Zoom things.
Got it going on, don't we?
Oh, yeah. It's that time of year, right?
It is.
Hello.
Hey, Jordan. How you doing?
How's it going?
Doing well. How about you?
Oh, just fine.
Good.
How's it going, Karen?
Good, Jordan. How are you?
Glad to be here.
Just a reminder, you are live somewhere,
Somewhere. Yeah, okay.
momentarily everywhere.
Yeah, well.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Lately.
Hey, Lily.
Hello.
End up starting right at 6:30 anyway.
Oh, kind of cool.
I guess David will wait until 6:30 because it looks like we're waiting for Josh to pop in. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Lily.
Josh.
Well, it is 3 minutes prior to 6:30, but what does everyone say that we take advantage and just get going?
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everyone to the Lincolnville Selectmen meeting. It is the 8th of February. And as a reminder, we are still operating under the state of emergency as declared by the governor. And as such, this Board of Selectmen is subject to the Maine Freedom of Access Act and will conduct this meeting over Zoom. And we encourage the public to participate through telephonic, video, electronic, or other similar means, either by writing in ahead of time with questions or comments, or if you are able to participate in this Zoom call via the chat feature. All actions taken by the board will be done via roll call, including adjournment. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, to the folks at the town office, and we will be happy to facilitate you getting involved. So before we get rolling, Kern, would you read the quote of the evening?
Where is it? The measure of a country's greatness is its ability to retain compassion in times of crisis. Thurgood Marshall.
Thank you very much. And David, do we have anyone who wishes to participate in the Citizens Forum for any non-agenda items?
We had nothing submitted via email by 3 o'clock, and I don't see anybody raising their hand or chatting at the moment.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. If there's nothing for the Citizens Forum for any non-agenda items, let's move along to the administrator's report.
The only thing I have beyond what's on the agenda this evening is you all just set through a rapid fire presentation regarding EMS, and just wanted to suggest that perhaps at an upcoming meeting, since one of the recommendations of the group was that the region consider a first responder unit, that perhaps we bring somebody in that knows a lot about first responders to explain to you what that's all about, what that means to the citizenry, and what's involved.
Good idea.
Sounds like a reasonable
idea.
approach. Yep. I'll find somebody. That's all I have beyond what's on the agenda.
Okay, well, let's move along to upcoming meetings and announcements.
All meetings are remote meetings unless announced otherwise. The Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee will be meeting the next 2 evenings, Tuesday, February 9th and Wednesday, February 10th at 6 p.m. Regarding the initial budget request and the presentation of those requests. The town office will be closed on Monday, February 15th in observance of President's Day. A meeting that is not on your agenda, the Wage and Personnel Policy Board is meeting on Tuesday, February 16th at 5 p.m. by a remote meeting. And the Board of Selectmen meet next in regular session on Monday, February 22nd, 6 p.m.
Thank you very much, David. And moving rapidly along, are there any upcoming community events anyone wishes to share? Not seeing anything. We'll move along to the meeting minutes from the 25th of January.
I move that the board approve the January 25th, 2021 meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Late, seconded by Selectman Ray. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion. Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson?
Yes.
Selectman Ray?
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker?
Yes.
And Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes. Motion passes. Thank you all. And next up, we have a liquor license renewal from the owner of McLaughlin's Lobster Shack. And David, you indicated that he may not be able to participate, which is fine, I think.
Correct. He was en route back from Southern Maine today and wasn't sure he'd be here before the meeting started or before the meeting adjourned. And I said I would tell you, and if there was some big problem, it could always be tabled to a future meeting.
Yep. Well, assuming everyone's had a chance to review the application, if there's nothing glaring, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board approve and sign the liquor license application submitted by the Beachfront Incorporated, doing business as McLaughlin's Lobster Shack.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Late, seconded by Selectman Garrettson. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Ray,
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker,
Yes.
and Selectman Dunn. My vote is yes. Motion passes. Thank you. And we have a couple committee chair updates for us. And do we have Linwood here? Yes, I see. So you're going to,
He's on his way.
perfect. Once he's, welcome, Linwood. The floor is yours.
Have to unmute there. Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Great.
Okay, great. Am I up first? I guess I am, yes. Well, first of all, it's good to be back another year. Good to see everybody here. Looks like in good health, so that's good. Just a way to introduce myself to the new members of the board. My name's Linwood Downs, and I'm the committee chair for the Financial Advisory Committee, and I work with Gary Schwal and Steve Kemple, along with Dave and Kayla. And what we kind of do is give kind of a little bit of an oversight to the investment policy of the town for its excess funds. And in addition to that, we also kind of monitor the reserve policy of the town as well. And just to give a little bit of background to the new members, just to kind of give you a little bit of history on the committee. The committee was formed back in the early 2000s to kind of look at what kind of emergency or reserve plan or reserve funds policy we should have as a town, given that we had none before, and given that historically what we had been doing with our excess funds is just keeping them in a checking account. So back in, I forget if it's 2001, 2002, we on the committee, or members of the committee at that time, went and researched a lot of other towns' policies as far as their reserve policies were concerned. And what we came up with and concluded was that a prudent strategy was to have approximately 3 months worth of expenses, town expenses, in some type of reserve or kind of rainy day fund, if you will, just in case there's some type of emergency or some type of crisis or some type of issue where the town really needed to draw on some funds quickly. And in that particular case, we've been following that policy ever since. So periodically we review that policy and make sure it's still prudent. And so far, everything seems to be that policy holds pretty well. So that's kind of the background on that. And so once again, the basic policy of the town for the reserves is that, you know, we keep at some level approximately 3 months worth of reserves. And in the past, that reserve started out below 3 months, and since then, through through fortuitous investment returns that we've had in other means, we've actually had a reserve fund that's exceeded that 3 month level for quite some time now, and that's a good thing. Like, for example, and I think this might be in your package, last year I think we had reserve funds of over 4 months, almost 5 months worth of expenses as unassigned reserves in the town's coffers. Now this year we don't quite have the audited financial statements yet, so I can't really give you some type of indication on where our actual reserves reside relative to the recommended levels, but I'm assuming that expenses and expenditures have been the same based on the budgets from the past year. And in that particular case, I'm sure the reserve funds, based on the levels on the investment funds, are adequate at this point in time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we have to, with our reserves, we actually have to invest those reserves, or at least put them in some type of return available funds in order to hopefully earn a rate of return that's a little bit higher than like a checking account or even a savings account at the local bank. And so since we've started this policy, our investment policy has been to roughly keep between 75% or higher levels of our reserves in very short-term or liquid bond funds or fixed income funds, so that in case the town needed the money, and not only for emergencies, but also to be able to put on excess funds during our cash flows variations that we have during the year during tax season, to earn a return, but then be able to pull those reserves out as we need them for the operating budget as well. So what we've done there is we have about, in this particular year, we have about 80% of our town's money in fixed income funds and in bank and other types of 2 to 3 year CDs. So as a result of that, that particular portion of our portfolio has been earning a return over the last year or so of approximately about 4%, not including our cash portion, which has only been earning about a 1% return on money. But the good news is it's higher than what we would earn in a bank. 4%, given that particular interest rates have been dropping fairly precipitously over the past year, with the Federal Reserve's stimulus package, where they're basically keeping interest rates very low, almost near zero. So that's a fairly solid return. The risk that we take is that obviously if interest rates go up, the market value of some of our fixed income positions might decline. But one of the things that you should know is that if we hold these CDs to maturity, or we have these funds or actual short-term bonds held to maturity, we get all of our money back. So there may be some if interest rates rise at a relatively extreme rate over the next 2 or 3 years, then theoretically, while we're holding them before they mature, the values could drop. But if we hold them to maturity, we'll get all our money back plus the coupon rate of those particular investments. So personally, and I think I don't want to speak for the rest of the committee members, but I think we're in fairly safe hands with respect to that portion of the portfolio. Now, in addition to that, what we also do is we also invest probably between 20 and 25% of our money in risky assets, basically investment funds that invest in equities. And most of our, if not all of our investments are in index funds, primarily Vanguard funds and a couple other mutual funds that have a broad diversification base for the investments. And so that particular portion of our portfolio is designed to give us a little bit of extra return and to kind of help with market fluctuations in the bond market. And so far, that particular part of our portfolio has also been fairly strong, as you can probably tell by the stock market rise over the last, really since 2010. So in this particular year, that portion of the portfolio increased almost 13%, helping to pull up the overall returns that we have on the total portfolio from about 3.5%, 4% on our fixed income portion to about 5% overall. So just to kind of summarize, we've earned about 5% on our investments for the past year. And I know in front of you, you probably have my report, but in the past year, we made a little bit more. Last year was an extraordinary year for the stock market, number one, and we were able to participate at some level with that. In addition to that, interest rates dropped fairly precipitously, so our market value of some of our bond funds also increased. So overall, First Investors, who is our investment manager, who actually manages the individual investment decisions for funds, has done a really good job. There's not a lot of what I call turnover in the portfolio. In other words, we're not changing, not trading our funds in and out on a daily basis. The one thing they do, especially on our equity side, we've been maintaining a fairly steady positions in that for quite some time. As our CDs roll off or our bonds roll off, or our bond funds start to change a little bit, what they do have to have is they have to reinvest that money. So one of the, I wouldn't say risk, but one of the risks that we may have going forward is as these longer term CDs in the next 2 or 3 years mature, they're going to be investing that. They're going to have to find a place to reinvest that money. And when they reinvest that money in a lower interest rate environment, I would expect that our returns on the fixed income side of the portfolio are going to decline at some level, so long as the Federal Reserve keeps the very accommodative monetary policy going, such that interest rates remain at or near zero. So just to kind of give you a little bit of forewarning over the next 1 or 2 years, the returns that we get today may not be quite as strong in the future, at least in the near future. So it was a good year. Money went, our town's money. First, we don't lose any money. That's always a good thing. And number two, the portfolio has increased about 5% this year on a very, very conservative philosophy as far as our investments are concerned. So that's the final thing I'll just mention quickly is just that we do pay first investors an annual fee. They earn approximately 0.5% of the total assets that are outstanding. For that, they not only manage our money, but they do a great job of a lot of our, what we call sub-accounting for all of our individual funds that we have for various different things that we have, such as the fire truck and various, cemetery accounts and things like that. So they manage a lot of that administrative stuff. They're not just managing a portfolio on an omnibus basis. They're doing a lot of extra services as well. And so I think for us, keeping them around as long as they're doing a solid job, I think that's a recommendation, or I know that's a recommendation of the committee at this point in time. So that's my kind of overview and report. And I invite any questions you might have on any of these topics.
David.
This isn't a question, it's just to chime in a little bit and explain a little bit more. Also, all of the investments are governed by state statute. We're very limited as to what we can and can't do with the investment. So if you all said, oh, you can, put 100% in, the horse races next week, the treasurer, me, is not going to do that, even if that was the policy. But it does limit what we can do. But on the same token, the policy is primarily preservation of principle first, so that we don't have to come give you a bad report ever.
Great, thanks for that. Questions for Linwood?
I do have one. Linwood, how long have we been with the group that's investing for us?
I think we'll
Did we
go
make
back.
a change?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part of your question.
I'm sorry. I tried to fit that in there. I didn't mean to do that. Did we make a change a couple years ago or on that, or have we been with them all along?
No, we've made a change probably about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago.
Okay.
I don't recall the first date. The first group we had was Union Trust. And then the people that we were relying on at Union Trust, they left. And so that opened up our kind of thought process as to, well, let's see, they won the first RFP, so to speak. And then when the people that were primarily involved with our account left Union Trust, we opened it up and we brought in, for example, Camden National, we brought in their investment subsidiary. We also brought in the First and 2 or 3 others, including the person who had managed our accounts in the past for Union Trust, who had gone on to a more of a brokerage firm, I guess. And so it was a competitive process at that point in time. And First Advisors impress both the committee at the time, but in addition to that, they also could do a lot of these ancillary services for us on the banking side, so we could get, kind of a big bang, double bang for our buck. And we continue to get that service. Dave, I'm
I
sorry.
was just going to say, if memory serves me, Linwood, a couple of years ago, and time flies pretty quickly, we also went back out and looked again to reaffirm the recommendation of the committee that we stay with First Advisors. Does that ring a bell with
Mhm.
you, or am I crazy?
Maybe that's what I was thinking about.
And the recommendation was based on performance and service to stay, and fees to stay where we were.
Looks
Any
like,
other questions for Linwood? Sorry, Karen.
nope, it's okay. I'm good.
I don't see anyone jumping up and down, Linwood. So thank you very much for, as usual, the excellent and comprehensive update.
You're welcome, and hope you have a good evening, and stay warm tonight. It's supposed to get cold. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so
Have
much.
Thank
a
you.
wonderful
Thanks
evening.
a lot.
Thank you very much. You too.
And while David does his clicking of buttons to bring over our next presenter, Gary Glazion, the chair of the Lakes and Ponds Committee.
He's on his way. Hopefully he knows that.
Oh, boy.
Hello? Can you hear
Hello,
me?
welcome, Gary.
And can you see me?
No, not quite.
Oh, here we go.
There you are.
You are welcome. The floor is yours, Gary.
Thanks. Good to see you all, and good to meet Selectman Barnett Parker. I don't believe we've met.
Hi, Gary. Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us tonight. The last time I briefed you was in July, and at that time, we were just starting our Phragmites project. And we've got some updates on that, and I'd also like to update you on where things stand with, let's see, with the unencapsulated polystyrene removal work, and also where things stand on bacterial contamination on Norton Pond. And I want to see if I can get this so that I can see all of you. Hold on just a minute. I'm trying to get the gallery view here. But I can't seem to do it, but that's okay. First, on the Phragmites removal project, to bring you up to speed on that, in July when we talked about the Phragmites problem and the fact that there was a concern about the Phragmites spreading into the shallow areas of Norton Pond. And we got approval from the state to do a pilot project, a one-time pilot project to do a removal this summer. We've been working on that over the months of July, August, and into September. As a volunteer group, we've gone out there to remove the Phragmites. I think on 6 successive weeks, we went out for 2 or 3 hours, and we cut as much of it as we could down to about 6 inches from the ground. And some of it was, I think, pretty close to 10 or 12 feet tall when we started. We're feeling pretty good about the project. I think that we got all of it down before it went to seed, which means that seeds wouldn't move over into Norton Pond. And Jordan, for you, the location of this stand of Phragmites is next to the trailer parking area at Breezemere Park, where the boat trailers are. It's in that wetland that abuts it. Again, I think that we did a pretty good job of getting it down, and the whole idea is to keep cutting it down so it can't photosynthesize and add more energy and nutrients to the roots, so that the next time it comes up, it will come up less robustly. And if that can be repeated for a number of years, you might really be able to start to get it under control, and that's our aim. In the season, we did hear from some people who were watching the work going on, who had some concerns about what was happening. There wasn't much awareness of the project. So one of the things we want to do moving forward is do a better job of informing the public of what's going on. And if you take a look at your package, there are a couple of draft pieces that we've put together to help accomplish that. The first one is a draft press release that potentially could go out to area newspapers that describes what we're doing. The second is a first-person account that Susan Silverio, one of our members, put together about her involvement in the project, how we approached it, some of our considerations. And I think that's kind of an interesting piece. If you look at it, it kind of talks about being a part of a town committee and working with others, exploring issues, trying to make good decisions about how we ought to proceed. And we were thinking that that's something that could be shared as part of presentations. Well, we also thought it might be something that could be part of the town's annual report to both talk about this project, but also get the message across to people about some of the rewards of working on a committee for the town. The last piece in the materials that I gave you is a draft of a sign that we would like to put up next to the nature trail sign in the area where the Phragmites is, that explains to people what the project is. It also has a QR code on it so that people could put their cell phones up to it and get some more background information on Phragmites and concerns with Phragmites. So we just wanted to share some of those ideas with you, see if you've got any thoughts or questions or concern about the public information piece of this. The other thing that we want to do is to apply for a permit from the state to go beyond the pilot project. Since this isn't a regulated wetland, it does require a state permit to do removals in the future. So that would be one of our next steps on the project. And before I move on to my next item, I'd like to see if there are any questions or comments on the Phragmites work.
I have a question, Gary. Thank you very much. I appreciate your diligence on all of this. What's the process in this, in the permitting, getting the permit, and what's the cost?
It's a permit that comes from the Department of Environmental Protection at the state level. We have to put a couple of pages together describing what the work is that we're doing. The cost is $200, and that cost would be for doing the work over a 2-year period.
Is this permit just one site specific?
Yes, it is. It is one site specific for this particular wetland. And the permitting fee is related to the size of the wetland or the size of the project that would be impacting the wetland.
Thank you.
Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, Gary, does that permit extend up to the stuff behind the library? How far back does it go, I guess, is my question.
The permit would cover the current spread of the Phragmites. So it would include all of the stuff that goes up the hill behind the memorial, and also the Phragmites that occurs at the base of the slope that goes down from the library lot.
Okay.
And some of the Phragmites is starting to come up in the woodland that has wet soil that's further back. So that would be included as well.
Okay.
So our thought would be to try to remove or control its spread completely.
Okay, and am I right? Did you say that we basically have another year to do this? The pilot project is 2 years long?
No, the pilot project was just last year. So that was a one-time free project. But what we'd be doing this coming season would be the first year of 2 years under the permit.
I got you. Thanks.
Anything else for Gary on the Phragmites? All right, Gary.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gary. This is certainly a worthwhile project.
Yeah, it's been a good project for the committee too. We've really got some enthusiastic members, some really capable members that came out on really hot days and worked hard. It requires using machetes and sickles, and we had some help from the county's Waldo County Soil and Conservation District. Had some interns that came out and helped us out with a powered brush cutter. So it's a pretty significant effort, but I'm really glad we were able to stem it this year, so it won't be spreading.
I just had a quick question. Yeah, I was wondering if this was at all comparable to, is it milfoil? Is this something that's going to be easily transmittable to the other waterways in the system? Do you anticipate, is there a way that we can proactively prevent something like from happening? I admit I'm ignorant on this specific species and how its pollen travels or its seeds and how prolific it can be.
Yeah, there is a concern that it will spread, and that's why we're doing what we're doing this year. Unlike aquatic invasive species that grow under the water that can spread much more easily with the flow of the water, the way this spreads is through its adventitious roots underground and has a really extensive root system, but it also has seed heads. So these are tall reeds that are anywhere from 10 to 14 feet high when they're fully grown. They have a seed head at the top that doesn't develop until the end of summer, and it's transmitted by the wind. So that was the big concern with the location of this particular stand, that it's within several hundred yards of Norton Pond, and that east end of Norton Pond is very shallow, and it's a kind of area, especially in a drought year like last year, when you've got a muddy shore where those seeds could fall and grow from that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, Josh.
Gary, how long do you think these plants have been growing there?
I think that they've been there about 5 years or so, but they're spreading exponentially, really, because once they start to get larger and have a larger perimeter, there's more growth. So that just in the last 4 years, I've noticed a big difference in the stand itself. It was interesting. there's an invasive plant specialist who works for Waldo County Soil and Water Conservation, who saw that and said to us, boy, you should really get that under control before it spreads. You know, taking a look at what it was and how close it was to the to Norton Pond, because if it ended up growing along the edges of Norton Pond, it would really exclude use of the pond easily and parts of Breesmere there, and it can have really significant impacts on property values too, because people can't get to the water or see the water once it really starts growing along the shoreline.
I really enjoyed Susan's piece, both of your submissions, the one with the QR code. I like that idea quite a lot for people to be able to tap into more resources about this. But I enjoyed the way in which the piece that Susan drafted, you know, because I always looked at those and thought, oh, they're kind of pretty, you know, and as this project has unfolded, realizing what a problem it is. So it's a really wonderful, you know, it's another great example of the good work your group's doing in terms of educating the public. And with that, do you have updates for us with the unencapsulated foam?
Yes, I do. And Susan is just such a great storyteller. She's been a great addition to the group and a lot of fun to work with as well. On the unencapsulated polystyrene, I think we're making really good progress. Just to bring people up to speed, I think it was back in 2017 that the town of Camden came to us and asked us to consider taking a look at removing the blue styrofoam that's used as flotation for docks and floats. They were planning to develop an ordinance, and they did go ahead and develop an ordinance to control it. So our response to that was to do a baseline survey that we did in the summer of 2018. We worked with the lake associations and our members, and we went out and we went around the perimeters of all of the lakes and ponds in Lincolnville and took a look at the number of floats that had the unencapsulated polystyrene and those that didn't. In that year, we found that there were, I think, 93 floats or docks that actually had the raw polystyrene that could break down, and I think that was about 27% of the docks and the floats. We brought that information back to the board, and the decision was made not to go forward with an ordinance, but rather to see what we could do through education. And the Lakes and Ponds Committee developed a trifold brochure. The select board sent that trifold brochure to all of the property owners of all of the lakes. I think there was a mailing of about 400 pieces that went out, sharing that information with the selectmen, urging the property owners to either replace, or if they were getting a new dock or float, to make sure that it was encapsulated, not unencapsulated, and to think about replacing them, replacing the ones that were there as well. And we did have some impact the next year. Let's take a look at the numbers here. We went from 93 to 71 when we did our survey in 2019. And that was going from 27% of all the docks and floats to 23%, because the baseline number was a little different in that year. And this year, when we went out, we went from that 93 to 71 to 52. So we're down to 52 now, which is 13% of the ones that were out. So we've pretty much cut in half the number of docks and floats that have the blue styrofoam. I know that the lake associations themselves and their communications and at their meetings have been pushing the issue. And there's been a lot of discussion around with lakefront owners. And I think that the push that the select board gave this really made a difference. So I think we're pretty happy with the progress we're making. And we don't see a need at this point for an ordinance if we can continue to make the kind of progress that we're doing. So I think that that's a good news story.
Perfect.
And then finally, I'd like to talk about Norton Pond and the historical problem that we've had with elevated E. coli levels there. We've had to have swim advisories for a number of years in a row. So we added an element to the Lakes and Ponds Committee program to be able to do a better job of tracking down where the elevated E. coli might be coming from. And the idea was that on days that they registered elevated values when they do the weekly testing of the beach and also the Drake's culvert, that we would, once that number was confirmed with the follow-up measurements, start doing some more measurements going up Meservey Brook or Minnow Brook, whatever you want to call it, which is the stream, the input stream to Norton Pond. So we've had that in our program for the Lakes and Ponds Committee for the last couple of years. But during the last couple of years, we've had drought conditions, very low levels of rain in the summertime. So we've seen better readings generally at Breezemere Park, and that continued to last summer, except there were of the 13 days that they went out at Drake's Culvert, on 6 of those days, they had elevated levels. I've talked to Paul Leeper about that, and he thinks it's associated with a beaver dam that was constructed just above the culvert, and the samples that they were taking were from just above the beaver dam itself, which means that it's probably more likely to be animal in origin rather than human origin, but not necessarily. And even if it is animal in origin, there can be things like Giardia that can cause problems as well. So we think it's something that needs to be monitored in the future. We want to continue to work with Paul Leeper and his group, and when they end up getting a high value at Breezemere Park, at the swimming beach, that we'll want to follow up when they confirm that 2 days later before the weekend and do some measurements upstream. So that's one of the things we're putting as a proposal in our upcoming budget to continue that work. Any questions about the E. coli issue?
Well, I just got thinking about that. Obviously, water runs downhill, and when you get a high test level at the beach area or right there, where they launch boats and everything, has the procedure been to head towards the culvert and test there, and then upstream to test up in there? And is that how you come to know that it's animal related, or most likely animal related, from runoff? Or is there a way that is there no way we can prove that?
There are ways of proving that, but not through the kind of testing that we're doing. There's other testing like the PCR testing that can identify where it might be coming from, but that's more expensive. So what we wanted to do as a first step to see if there was any really obvious source coming in on the inlet stream above Drake's Culvert, testing just above the culvert, testing several hundred yards up, and then testing at the base of the beaver dam that actually comes out of the area where you see the marsh, when you're looking down from Route 52 or behind where the general store is, to maybe try to get a fix on whether it's coming from that area, which that very upper area would probably be likely to be more of an animal source, or whether it's coming from some intermediate area. So it's kind of trying to nail down where it might be, and it could involve exactly the kind of thing that you're talking about. Of once you've fixed that it's coming from or through the culvert, is what's going through the culvert what's actually coming down to the beach? Or could it be things like the disposal of diapers that don't get disposable diapers that don't get put in are properly taken care of? So there are potentially other sources. I know that there's been more attention paid to dogs and pets in the area too, that having a park used for dogs can really elevate levels of E. coli in the water adjacent to a park like that. So it's trying to narrow things down, and whatever insights anyone has in terms of what they think might be a source would be good to know. But again, it's been pretty clean over the last 3 years, but it's been really dry. So there's probably not been too much washing in the way it usually would. And usually you see the highest levels after a heavy rain.
Any other questions for Gary?
Yeah, I've got a question. Yeah, going back to your polystyrene. Does the Lakes and Ponds group, or have they thought that it's time to do another round of mailers, as it were, to dock owners? The first round got us down so far. Are we ready for another one?
Well, one of the things that we could do would be to get another letter out to talk about the progress that's been made, and we could push to get it out more. There's some expense involved in doing it. We've cut it in half. Getting roughly 20 more docks out every year. Maybe it makes sense to see how we do this coming year. And if progress slows, maybe that would be the time to try to get something out. But I'd be interested in all of your thoughts on that too.
Sure. Gary, do you know if there's does the state DEP have a program that we could tap into, maybe just for as far as materials go, for education about polystyrene? Whether
no, they don't. I think that what we produced, the brochure that we produced, is one of the only ones around. And in fact, Camden took a look at it and made copies of ours to use for their purposes as well. I don't think that there's much available at the state, but I'll check that out and see if they developed anything recently. At least when we were originally looking into it, we didn't see anything.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Gary tonight? Gary, thank you again for being an excellent representative for the Lakes and Ponds Committee and for giving us a really wonderful and comprehensive report. Thank
you. Appreciate doing it. It's a great group of people to work with. It's been a good experience for me. There's their enthusiasm, their capability, the breadth of their experience, their life experience that they bring to it. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you,
Gary, take care.
Yeah.
And moving along, we have a few different conversations regarding broadband, and not to say the least, we have Susan Corbett, who David will be doing his magic to bring her over to talk to us about her efforts and what's happening in the broadband world from her perspective.
I think she's coming.
Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Hey, Susan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi,
Thanks
Susan.
for having me
Thank you
here
so much
tonight.
for coming.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, I've spoken to a few of you over the last several weeks, and I know that you've been doing some work. You've had a committee doing some work in trying to figure out what the needs are for Lincolnville, broadband needs are for Lincolnville. So you've done some work, and we thought it might be helpful for me to talk about some of the work that could be done and how to go about it. So my name is Susan Corbett. I am the director of the National Digital Equity Center. I am the former CEO of Axiom, which is a last mile broadband provider. So I know the challenges on last mile broadband and connecting every home and business in the state. I stepped down as CEO a couple of years ago to found the National Digital Equity Center, which has a goal of closing the digital divide here in Maine and across the United States. I am a board member with the Connect Maine Authority, and I was the chair of the Infrastructure Committee, which included broadband for the Governor's Economic Recovery Committee. So I come at it from a lot of different angles. I've been in this world for several years, so I'm a great advocate and proponent of broadband and trying to make sure that all of our homes across the state have connectivity. So I'll just sort of that's a little bit of a background in all of this. From what I've read and understand about Lincolnville, you've had a committee that has done a lot of work, and sort of you're ready to take that next step or figure out what the next step is. With the Connect Maine Authority, there are grant programs for community broadband planning, and this might be something that the town might want to consider. I don't know if you have to reactivate your broadband committee, but you'll want to have a broadband committee to move that work forward if you're looking at applying for some grant funds. And I'm not sure whether you have contacted anybody at the Island Institute. The Island Institute does a lot of work and support for coastal and island communities here in Maine, and they would be a great resource. I think I'm going to stop there and let you all ask me whatever questions, because I'm not sure what you're all looking for tonight, but happy to answer whatever you might be thinking of.
Yeah, Josh, you had your hand up.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So I want to first say that at the moment, Lincolnville is working with, Camden, Rockport, Hope, Northport, and other towns may be joining in a calling ourselves the Midcoast Broadband Coalition, and we just joined a few weeks ago, and we're talking about what would it look like for our towns to work together to do broadband on a community level. Can you talk about the strengths and weaknesses of towns going it alone versus joining up with other towns?
So I'd be happy to. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, right? And so what we know is that We Mainers are very independent. We don't like to others telling us what to do. We are not that we don't want to play well with others, but it's sometimes difficult to all be on the same page when you're looking at multiple towns. That said, if you can make it work, that is the best way to go about it, because there is strength in numbers. And when we're looking at funding that is likely coming down, both on the federal level and on the state level, regional plans are going to carry a lot of weight. So the Connect Maine Authority has only had about $1.5 million or so per year for grant projects. The voters in July approved a $15 million bond. The applications for those for infrastructure will happen probably within the next month or so. We're only looking at releasing about half of those funds, and then the second half a month or two after that. It's going to be competitive, right? And so when you have communities that are working together for the common good, it's going to carry some very good weight. The other pot of funds that we're likely going to see is coming from the federal government. We know that this administration is a very big proponent of broadband adoption. And so a community or a group of communities need to get prepared as quickly as they can, because there are going to be a lot of applicants for those funds across the country.
Susan, so do I understand correctly, because I think I had read this as well, is that with the new allocation of funds that's so much greater, that the priority of Connect Maine has shifted towards communities and municipalities rather than end of the line incumbent providers?
Yes, that's correct. So there are going to be two pots of funds. One will be on line extensions. So you have an incumbent provider in your community that you hear this all the time. Everybody has broadband except for these 5 streets. And so there'll be a set aside of funds for line extensions for existing providers. Providers will be able to apply for those funds, but it has to be an unserved area. And unserved is any area that is less than 25/3. The second pot of funds, which will likely be the larger pot of funds, are going to be on municipally driven projects. So your broadband committee, whether it's going to be part of the consortium or whether you're standing alone, that broadband committee is important, because it is the driving force to applying for those funds to the Connect Maine Authority. Now, what typically happens is, and what is going to, which will be weighted more, is a community that has a community broadband plan, because that is telling the Connect Maine Authority that you've done your due diligence, you know what you have for broadband, you know what you want for broadband, you know what the gap is, you've addressed the digital inclusion components, which is affordable broadband, affordable equipment, digital literacy training, and public computer access. The municipal projects will need to have a community broadband plan in order to apply for funds.
Other questions for Susan right now? Susan, I have a question for you just regarding, in general, how accessibility and affordability is being defined from your level, and then how you're seeing it play out in different communities in terms of wrestling with that very broad.
It's a great question. So the National Digital Equity Center, we have raised just under $4 million to provide free digital literacy training to all Maine residents over the next several years. We also have a program we just got funded to provide tablets to low to moderate income individuals who need a device and or an internet connection. So just to know that that's the work that we do every day. We know there's lots of different terms that are out there. So there's digital equity, digital inclusion, broadband adoption, affordability. So digital equity it means that we want everyone to participate and have the skills to participate with technology and all of the resources to be part of a community. In order to get there, you have to achieve digital inclusion, which is the affordable broadband, affordable equipment, digital literacy, and public computer access. Broadband adoption means that if there are connections at 100 homes, according to the statistics, both here in Maine and across the country, there will only be about 75% of those 100 homes that will subscribe to broadband. The number one reasons that people do not subscribe to broadband is affordability. The number two reason is tied. It's affordable equipment and digital literacy training. I don't know what to do with it once I have a computer. Affordability is very difficult to define because what I can afford may be different than what you can afford. And so when a community decides to build out a network or to whether they're going to hire an existing provider or they're going to build their own network, they have to look at the affordability issue. And one of the ways to get to that is to understand the demographics of your community. We just did a digital inclusion and digital equity plan for a coastal community, and the town officials were very surprised when they found out that 25% of their residents of their homes had family median income of $10,000 or less. That's a big number to consider because if they're going to build out broadband, take rate is going to matter because take rate ensures the return on investment for the money you are investing in building a network. So you have to have a plan for affordability, and whether that is in raising funds that you can subsidize or whether you've worked it out with the broadband provider that you're working with, but you need to be able to address it one way or the other so that no one is left behind. When you're building out networks and everyone's getting excited because maybe it's a fiber to the home, fiber tends to be more expensive than a DSL connection. And so you've raised the rates on a connection, but if you don't have a plan for offsetting that cost to low income families, then you're going to continue to make that digital divide even wider.
Thank you.
So what should we be aiming for in regards to speed? Is the 25.3 the goal, or is it the minimum, or?
Not even, right? So 25.3 is that's the bottom line. That is the bottom line for Connect Maine. That's also the number that the FCC uses is a 25/3. But we know that since the pandemic, a 25/3 connection doesn't work when you have several people in the home that are all on video conferences, whether it's the kids on remote school or remote workers. For a community, you need to, so we talk a lot about fiber. And one of the reasons that you talk about fiber, it's one of the only technologies that you have a symmetrical connection. That means your download speeds and your upload speeds are the same. So many years ago, we used to hear, oh, only businesses needed the upload speed, right? But that's no longer true because if you look at your phone and you take a picture, you're uploading it to the cloud, right? Or you're sending it off to someone. So upload speeds do matter. We should be looking at no less than 100 meg symmetrical connection when we're building out networks with the capability of increasing the connections up to a gig. We need to be looking towards the future and building networks that are anything less than symmetrical. There's going to be an end of life for those networks.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Kern. Is the reason why the number 25.3 is being offered is relative to that affordability question?
No, it's so in the Connect Main world, 25 over, anything less than 25 over 3 is considered unserved. So if you take a basic DSL connection, it's probably a 7 over 1 or a 7 over 2 or a 15 over 2. That's considered unserved, according to the state of Maine, to the Connect Maine guidelines. Connect Maine in their grants, they have to be at least the upload speeds have to at least be 10 megs. So the upload speeds have to be better than the 3 megs. And then the higher the speed, when they're applying for grants, the higher the speeds, the more points you're going to get in the grant in scoring the grant application. That 25 over 3 is mirroring the FCC criteria of unserved of less than 25 over 3. It's very confusing because you hear numbers all over the place, but it's the 25 over 3. Anything less than that is considered unserved. And we have a lot of places across the state that are served by DSL or maybe some old cable, although cable tends to, you tend to get at least 10 megs up with cable in most places, but certainly on DSL, it's an antiquated system when you're looking at a 7 over 1 or 15 over 2 connection. It's not going to support what you need to be online.
Thank you.
Susan,
Mike.
Sorry.
Yeah, Mike, you had a question.
Yeah, real quickly. You mentioned for the digital inclusion plan, which would eventually go to Connect Maine, for example, has to have a couple few criteria in it. Do you all have a list of that criteria that is available, which we could get our hands on?
Yeah, so if you I'll send the link, but if you go to maine.gov/connectme, CONNECTME, it'll bring you to the Connect Maine website. Right. And then under grants, you pick planning, and it will give you a phase 1 and phase 2 and what those grants are, what they're trying to achieve in when you are applying for one of those grant funds.
Okay, so if we were to go to Connect Maine for the planning grants, criteria will be this. They will include what you listed as necessary ingredients for equitable digital inclusion. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And if a community or even a broadband provider that's applying for line extension, the new grants are going to require that you have a plan for affordability.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Jordan.
Well, since you have so much experience, especially in the state of Maine, I'm sure you must know more contractors and outbuilders, such as GWI, and others that are building fiber currently. In our last meeting, we were told that there aren't other companies building fiber out. And I was wondering if you could speak to maybe Calais and Baileyville and Islesboro and the types of systems that were built there, and maybe if you knew what companies or if there were other providers that were doing that sort of work in Maine.
Right. Okay. So the Calais Baileyville formed a broadband utility. It's a nonprofit organization, and they own the network. So they have an operating, any broadband provider can provide service on that network. Millinocket, the Katahdin region, is also looking at a broadband utility. It can work beautifully, and in other cases it might not be the right solution. There is no one solution across the state. There are Islesboro was the first community that built out a fiber to the home. They made sure that the affordability was not going to be an issue. So they built into the price of broadband and into the tax structure enough funding so that the cost to the home is only $30 per month. The rest of it is through raising tax through their tax structure, and they ensured that there was when they built the network, that there was a connection to every single home on that island. No one was left behind. The Cranberries, the town took a vote. They voted to bond building out broadband. Then they applied for a USDA grant. They got the grant, and so they didn't have to bond it. They did a private public partnership with Axiom. That in that case, the town gets a percentage of the revenue back every year. So it's a true partnership where the town did an RFP. Axiom won the bid as an operator, but their model is that they're in that together, and they're both the town and the broadband provider are both seeing some of the revenue that's coming in from those connections.
Great. Susan, we have had a question come in from Stephen Coltai. He had his hand patiently up while we've been having a chat, and he asked the question or statement: I imagine virtually all towns in Maine are like Lincolnville, already at least partly served by an incumbent ISP. What are the models best practice for working with the incumbent but still accelerating broadband penetration while achieving best possible cost to citizens?
That's a great question. For communities that are moving forward with community broadband plans, it brings an impartial, the consultants are the impartial person in the room, right? And they typically will bring in all of the broadband providers that are serving the community and have some very, very frank discussions about where they have broadband, where they don't have broadband, and what their plans are. Now, in the Connect Maine Authority and the new iteration of the infrastructure grants, when a community or when a broadband provider is applying for funds in a certain community, they're going to have to post it prior to the grant round being open to make sure that there isn't a provider that is already serving that community or is planning on serving that community. The consultants during the community broadband planning process really does a deep dive with specifically the incumbent providers. It's always the easiest solution if you have a provider that is building out in your community or has built out. If the town raises funds to finish off the job, does that work, right? And so getting the pricing along that, what is that going to cost? Now, typically, if a provider is building the network, it's a transactional deal. It doesn't, the community typically doesn't have a vested interest. It's sort of like you're paying the cable company. You're going to pay the cable company to build out broadband on these 3 streets. That network belongs to the cable company. The town has just paid to have the broadband built. That's different than when you're doing a public-private partnership or a model like the Baileyville-Calais, where the community owns and controls the network. So those are the questions and the decisions that happen during the community broadband planning process. You're working through that to figure out what is going to be the best model for your community. Now, if you're looking at doing a regional plan, it's no different than on a regional level. What's going to be the best way to serve all of the communities in a regional plan? And what you want to make sure is that no one is left behind. When you're building out broadband, you are going to want to demand that every single home is connected, even the homes that are really hard to reach, because your town is investing, you're spending money, and you don't want to leave anyone behind.
Yeah, Josh.
So speaking to that point, We're discussing now in our last coalition meeting, and I'm sure it'll come up again on Wednesday. Does that mean that the community should commit to if it was a broadband regional utility, that the utility commits to paying for running fiber to every home, even if it's a half-mile driveway? Should there just be an allowance of 250 feet? My personal feeling is, as you said, no one should be left behind. And to me, that's the most important thing. But I'm struggling with, how do you make it fair for perhaps the majority of people with a driveway that's under 250 feet, having to shoulder the cost of building out for those longer driveways.
It's a good point. So the town of Oak Bluffs did a community broadband plan a year or so ago. They had they also took it to a town vote. They had the most people show up at that meeting who voted in favor of building out a fiber to the home to all homes in Oak Bluffs. There were about 400 homes. They then applied for USDA Reconnect grant, and good things happen sometimes. They were awarded that grant. Oak Bluffs is on. So I live up in Jonesport, and I don't know if you know Oak Bluffs, but Oak Bluffs is
beautiful. I've been there.
Beautiful, very dramatic. Many of those homes have very long driveways. They also have a high number of seasonal people, right? And so they basically put a line in the sand and said, everybody's going to get connected. We're just going to roll this into the total cost for the town. We're not going to worry about that this house only cost us $1,000 and this house cost us $4,000. We're just going to make sure that everyone has a connection. And for the seasonal people, you can't, you're not going to be able just to shut it off and turn it on, as you come and go. You're going to have to commit to X amount of months per year, because that mattered on the return on investment to keep the network operational. So I think that, so you're right. Sometimes it's difficult when you've got somebody who's way out the end of a peninsula and, or deep in the woods. There are communities that might look at high capacity wireless links to get to those, really hard to reach. There's some licensed spectrum that can guarantee a better connection. And you can put a gig over air. It's just a matter of how much is it going to cost to do that. So I think that, who's ever helping design that network can certainly look at that. But I wouldn't, but as a general rule of thumb, you really want to make sure that you can get a hardwire fiber connection to every home.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful.
Shoot for the stars. That's just, when you start making compromises, who's going to be left out?
And with that example, is it like any other sort of utility, even if it's a quasi-municipal utility, that requires a critical mass of subscribers in order to make it work?
You do. So when you're running fiber, it's expensive, right? And it's expensive to maintain it. And in rural Maine, it's really super expensive because you have your houses really spread out. Now, Lincolnville, your houses are closer together. You have a denser population. But the number of subscribers matter because there's always going to be fixed cost in maintaining and operating that network. So the higher number of subscribers ensures the long-term viability of the network, to make sure that you're meeting all of the expenses, you're meeting your return on investment. When you're building that network, whether it's the town or in partnership with an internet service provider, you don't want to lose money, right? And so making sure that everyone, that you have as many connections as possible, a high take rate will matter.
Thank you for that.
Very quick.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
A very, very, very quick question. Just moving forward, since you know that we're kind of looking at a multifaceted approach, would you recommend, regardless the approach we take, of having a broadband committee? Do you think that that's helpful regardless?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You need voices, and it needs to be more than one voice. And there should always be somebody who, whether it's a town official on that committee, so that the town is aware of what's going on, but you want a representation, whether you're going to go regional or you're going to go on it on your own. You want to have a committee. What I know is that the communities that have the stronger broadband committees, those advocates, that's the key to success. If you do not have those champions, whether it's on that, whether you're doing it local or regional, the likelihood of that project moving forward is not good. So you want to have strong voice, you want to have advocates, you want to be the cheerleaders. You need to get the entire town engaged. If you're going to look for bond money, if you're going to apply for grants, you want as many people understanding why this is important. The National Digital Equity Center can do a digital inclusion and digital equity plan. We do that. We also promoting the classes that we're doing, so people understand why. I think of infrastructure as the how. How are we going to get everybody connected? And digital inclusion is the why. Why is this important? So we're happy to work with you as you move forward on this.
Thank you. I wanted to offer a chance for our town administrator to ask a question, or nope? Okay, just making sure.
I'm good. This is your night.
So any other follow-up questions for Susan? Susan, thank you very much for lending us your expertise here tonight. And
you're very, very welcome. I'm always happy to do this, and it's always fun to see towns taking, you take charge of your own destiny, and that's how we move broadband projects forward. So kudos to all of you for doing this, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Susan.
And this topic of conversation is not over. We have an update.
Hang on. I think I just sent Karen back to
oh, no.
be an attendee. I tried to click on Susan and she clicked herself off.
You're fired.
We'll get him back. Oh,
yes. He's coming.
You sent him back to attendees.
Yep.
David, who's McLaughlin?
I think it might be Rick.
Yeah, he's in the lineup here in terms of as a panelist. So he certainly doesn't have to hang around, given that we've already approved
Come along like you did me. It seemed to be simple.
Hang on. On mine, he's gone back to. Oh. Mine, he went back to being an attendee, but.
Am I on, Dave?
Rick, you're on. You've already been approved.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the board for that. We got it on the telephone when we were almost home, so I appreciate your doing that. If you have any questions, I am here.
I think you're good, Rick. Thank you so much for popping in.
Thank you,
Thank
Rick.
you. Good night.
Have a good night. Okay, David, do you want to give a brief synopsis of the Midcoast Broadband Coalition meeting that you and Josh attended?
Maybe you let Josh or Selectman Garrettson if he wants, or otherwise I'll chime in. Or I just know that at the last meeting, or the meeting we got authorized to participate in, they suggested that we go and attend and tell you what we learn and keep you up to date.
Great.
Selectman Garrettson, would you prefer, or would you prefer me?
Well, I guess I first want to say the minutes are quite detailed, actually, and I think they do a better job explaining what we did than I can. But yeah, it really came down to, well, meeting each other and talking about the next goals, which I think it was to move forward with speaking with a consultant. They needed from each town, I think, 3 things, which was density. David, do you remember what the 3 basic things they needed? It was like density, number of houses, something like that, to get a baseline.
Was it defining, well, maybe I'm getting confused what your goals were, was defining what's meant by high speed, what it means to be available.
Yeah,
and then developing that memorandum of understanding.
Yep.
Yeah, we're crisscrossing a couple of different things, but I was trying to see if I could find it here in the minutes about the homework. And they were really, I think, in the end, not necessarily looking to have that homework assignment completed for Wednesday, but versus talking to, I can't remember the fellow's name, not Matt, who's ever coming, to help define even what the homework assignment was or is, because there was some discussion about, once again, defining access. And does that mean at the curb, at the house? And, my extension is, does it mean in the living room? What does that mean? Because when you talk to different people, it means different things. And that was obviously when we get around to defining the mission and the vision and the goals, which the group was having discussion on, there were differing opinions. And I think that's going to be critical, whether it be here in Lincolnville or in the regional effort. And Susan touched on it on Selectman Lake's question. On the 25-3, that's really what anybody considers the minimum now, but to not aim for that. And yet that's the FCC's definition of high speed. And it's not necessarily ours or the groups, but it came up at the meeting. I don't remember the individual that brought it up, but he pointed out that was the FCC definition. And I think we all know that 5 years ago, 25-3, we'd all been ecstatic, but with some of the experiences we've had lately, that doesn't always cut it. And so I think the real meat of it was kind of more organizational at the last meeting, because it was the first one that Lincolnville and Hope representatives had attended. Since that meeting, Northport's joined on, and I understand now that they've made inroads in with Rockland and Thomaston. So it's growing faster than fast, but we want to make sure ultimately that if we're going to participate here, that your goals for Lincolnville line up with the goals of the coalition. Otherwise, we'll be going down a maybe not a bad direction, but a different direction than where we want to be. And so I think it's important that the Broadband Coalition work to define its mission, values, vision, goals, and that you folks have that same a parallel effort going on, so that we make sure that we're not spinning our wheels on a regional effort when we could be, gaining traction on a local effort. There, I'll stop.
And that'll be an excellent segue when we are concluded in having our conversation about the Midcoast Coalition. So anything else? The minutes, as you said, Josh, are really comprehensive, which is fantastic. And I am personally very encouraged by that. It's always great to see really detailed minutes, but also the amount of ground that it seemed that you covered in your conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. But again, we haven't decided at all as a coalition what access means, right? Is it just a main road, or is it 100 feet in to the door? And at the last coalition meeting, I thought, well, maybe it's fair just to go 250 feet, and then the homeowner has to figure it out. But Susan, Islesboro does it to the home, and what Susan said really, it makes me think more strongly that we really should take care of everyone, because we'll be better off as a community if everyone gets internet to their home, and that's guaranteed. Because if we don't do that, then it could be a similar situation to what we have now, where there's a lot of people in Lincolnville with LCI fiber running off of the main road, but they can't afford to pay for it to go to their home, and so they don't have broadband yet. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, Kern.
So a definition of to the home would be attached to the house, but from the attachment to the inside of the house, the equipment is the homeowner's responsibility. Am I correct in assuming that? Because I think that's a question that probably should have been asked to Susan, just for comparison. What are you thinking, Josh?
In terms of if the homeowner has to pay for the Connect box in their home?
Correct.
I
mean, what does to the home mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it attached to the house and fiber run into the house, and then I've got a fair amount of equipment here to get me up and running. So, I can't imagine that it's cheap. With Tidewater, I'm sure I paid something. There's no question about that. But
yeah, I think it's just to the outside of the home.
Okay.
And then from that point on, the homeowner has to pay for it. Just like, when you I guess everyone pays for the modem, or back in the cable modem days, at least I remember having to pay for that modem.
Yeah.
Could I make just a older school analogy? I think it's very similar to, actually it's not older school, because they used to provide you a phone and charge you for the telephone company way back, but they bring the service to your house, and then if you want a wireless phone, or if you want a different rotary phone, the homeowner is responsible for that and equipment. And so, usually internet companies will provide you with a router or a modem, but it's very low powered. I've always bought my own, and they've never been more than $200 or $300, and that's for the Uber quality of it. So it is the definition to the home coming to the building, and then whatever the homeowner wants to do as far as spreading the signal within their house, that's up to them for the expenses.
It's just tough, and I understand that, and that's what I thought that to the home was going to mean. It's just tough when we say no one will be left behind, because in this town alone, if you talk to people about that, they're figuring, good, I'm going to have internet. Some of them are not going to realize, nor are they going to have the resources to finish the connection. So,
or afford it.
Correct. And so we've got to really think about and talk about how the conversation is going to go with everybody outside of these meetings, meaning the community, or the communities, because I'm sure in all of these towns there are going to be challenges like that.
Yeah.
That having cable or whatever, or fiber to a house is one thing, but true connectivity is totally different, especially if somebody can't afford it.
Yeah, absolutely. Affordability, that's everything, right? None of this matters if the average person in Lincolnville can't afford it. It's all for nothing.
So I guess with that, there's got to be a provision or a conversation about or a definition of what is affordability, and what is connection. Those are two very important things, and they can mean two totally different things to different people. So it's got to be crystal clear.
Yeah. And that's it's really important that our board has an understanding of what we want as a board. So then David and I can bring that to the coalition and say, well, this is what Lincolnville thinks the definition of affordability and access should be.
Right.
As part of that.
And as such, that is our next task at hand, is to have a conversation about the goal that the board had set with the Broadband Committee. And then I think it's timely that we have, a chat about where we are in terms of our thinking right now, so that we can remain as dynamic as possible within these ongoing and developing conversations. And I guess I have a couple of questions, and, I don't think we necessarily have the answers here, but I'd be curious to get a casual quote from our current service provider, just based on the presentation that they gave us at our last meeting of an estimate, a cost estimate of what it would take to get 100% penetration to every residence, regardless of it being a town road or a private road, so that every residence had at least fiber running by it, and then we can hash out the details of, whether that means at the street or at the house.
I believe LCI quoted us at a cost of $16,600 per mile for laying fiber. I could be wrong, but I could swear that that's what they said the last time they were here.
Actually, I thought it was 20.
Oh, 26. Sorry.
25.
Okay.
Like 26,000.
22.5, I think Mike said. I don't know why I had 16 stuck in my head from there, but
I don't have any of the numbers in my head right now, so that's
No,
what
me either.
No, during the CARES project that they did, the CARES money grant that they got, they were spending 22,500 per mile.
So we could. Sorry, go ahead, Karen.
With the run that just finished, meaning the fiber run that they just finished for this grant. Does anybody know, or can anybody put a number to how many more miles is left?
It's actually in our minutes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It is 8 miles.
Yep. 8 miles.
And then they say, the 22,500 cost per mile. So, you multiply those two things, and that's, I guess,
175.
77,000. Yeah.
Well, but is that public roads, or is that inclusive of private roads? That's my
Public,
question.
public only.
Yeah.
I know that one of them is private because it's mine, and I'm living on
And
a private road, and they've got me listed. They've got Quarry Road listed, so go figure.
I'll take that off there.
I'm not going to say anything.
I think there are some gaps in that list too, myself.
Yeah. Well, and like Karen pointed out last time with Moody Mountain Road, I mean, that was a perfect example of just, a glaring hole in the service. So,
Okay.
But excuse me, but getting back to what Laylee, you were saying, how we should try to get a number from them. I think if they were to come down on, let's say, 175,000 to complete the 8 miles that they think they need to complete, that still leaves not connecting people from the roadside to the home. And I think that's going to be a big part of the cost. So I would like to get that number from them as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how we do that or how they would do that, but I'd like to get it from them, because I tend to think that would be a big part of it.
I mean, I feel it would be useful for us moving forward to just really let's put the price tag out there so that we can look at it. And so, the other part of that is, affordability. Let's say, we want no one left behind, but if we have a similar income bracket where, you know, for argument's sake, we have 25% of our population that makes, you know, less than $10,000, you know, that's a significant segment of the population that is neither going to be able to bear the burden of a tax increase or a monthly levy for access. And so then we talk about subsidies, right? Yeah, Josh.
Well, so first off, I think LCI's cheapest rate for 50 down, let's see, 10 up is $69, which is, I think that's expensive. And the hope would be if the coalition hired a consultant and the conclusion was that doing a regional utility, for example, was the best idea, and that was funded. The build out was funded through signups and through monthly subscriptions. Then the hope would be that you wouldn't actually have to raise taxes, and that you could set the monthly price for everyone at something lower than $69. I mean, ideally under $50. And so, in the in the long run, actually be cheaper for people.
Well, and for argument's sake, you know, what makes $50 a month affordable? You know, for some folks, $30 a month additional is beyond. And so if we're, you know, well, I guess let's just have the conversation. Is our goal, as it was, to see that no resident is left behind, that 100% of our residents have access, understanding that there will be a significant segment of our population that just cannot afford any additional expenses?
Well, listening to Susan Corbett explain how we might be able to get money to fund what we might want to do, we would have to include the people who right now we think we'd be subsidizing. We might have to include that into the cost, and it seems to me that we're going to have to, like you said, deal with that, have a conversation about it. That's why we have consultants, you know. That's why, you know. But I agree that we have to, as a town, not just these six of us, but as a town, we have to feel that we have to come to an agreement that that we want to do just that, include everybody. That has to be a townwide feeling, I think, for this whole thing to sail.
Yep. Yeah, Jordan.
Well, also to speak to that, I feel it's funny because I almost feel like it's the opposite impetus where, like, my motivation are the people who can't afford and access this. You know, it's not my first thought to try and be complacent to everyone who already has this and get to it. My motivation is, even if I had the best service ever, I want everyone to have access. And the only way we're going to do that is by taking control of that ourselves. And I just wanted to speak to affordability and access. I've been, since 2003, I was buying internet service. And the slowest place I've ever had is here. And the most expensive I've ever had is here. I've been used to paying $40 a month for internet that has at least 100. And I forget what the upload speeds were back then. It was probably really low. But I've lived in 3 different countries and 4 or 5 different states. And when I come back to Maine, I see dial-up speeds, and the prices are like you're getting the most luxurious high-speed internet out there. $70 a month for internet, you should be getting the top-of-the-line service. And in every other market in the country, they are. So I think that's an important thing to take into factor when we talk about affordability. Can I afford what I'm paying right now? Yeah, but it would be a lot more affordable if I was getting a performance out of it too. So those 2 things, I think it's most important to protect and take care of the weakest in our society and the ones who are struggling the most. And we're in a position to do that. And I think that should be the driving force. And as Susan spoke to, part of doing this is bringing education and accessibility to people who can't. And I believe it was Karen who brought up the people who don't know about this digital education is also part and parcel in it. So we're getting more people using it because they know what it is and they're able to hook up to it, which increases the possible revenue stream. And at the same time, we're increasing property value and we're increasing the ability of citizens in our town to make money for their family because they're hooked into a digital economy that the world runs on.
Yeah. So back to the point at hand is what is affordable? What can we, I guess my question is for people who can't afford any additional monthly costs, how do we define affordable?
Well, they can't afford anything, just per definition. But for me, what's affordable is what I'm paying right now, but with a better service. So, like I said, if for everyone in Lincolnville, you kept their payment exactly the same, but you increase their service to 150 symmetrical and above, that would, by nature, increases the affordability because you're not having increased expenditure, but you're receiving something extra for your money. So that's why I think it's kind of a red herring argument to be talking about people who can't afford it and what their affordability is. And the fact of the matter is, if they can't afford anything, then the affordability is zero to them.
Yeah, Josh.
I haven't looked at the broadband survey. I think we actually asked this question, so maybe there might be data there for what people think. Or we don't ask what do you think is affordable, but we ask what are you willing to pay, and there could be some information there that could be helpful because it's the six of us can't define what's affordable because we all have a different opinion of that.
Right.
Something that might be skewed a little bit because I still go back to I just don't think we reached enough of the people for that survey, and one of the biggest reasons is no connectivity. I know we got a fair amount of information drawn through our local school, but I still think there's a fair amount of people that didn't participate in that.
Yeah.
And that could be directly related to no connectivity.
Before COVID hit, when we were talking about doing a survey, I was thinking this is great. Let's knock on every door in Lincolnville, like literally knock on every door and ask questions. And then, we couldn't do that.
So what do we want to send Josh and David off to this next coalition meeting with in hand in terms of where we're feeling we should be at in terms of both accessibility and affordability?
Well, I think it's those two items need to be defined, and they need to be defined within not just the town, but within the towns themselves. Like Josh said earlier, we need to be on the and we've all said it. We all need to be on the same page, or it's not going to be successful. So I think it's going to be I think we need to know what the group is going, how they're going to define both of those first. Before I really want everybody to have connectivity. I think we all genuinely want that, but I want to know how we're number one, what's the terminology? How are we going to talk about it to people, and how are we going to take care of the people who can't afford it? I mean, right. I keep going back to that. It's going to be to their house or their apartment or whatever it is, tent, whatever. It's going to be there. But how are they going to get connected if they can't afford anything? That's what and something, there was a comment there about how Islesboro did it. The people who can't afford it don't afford it, but they have it. So somehow, some way, and everybody's payment per month townwide is $30 a month. So how are they doing that?
Yeah. Well, I'm very curious and also happy to see how this meeting goes, and then see if we can get some definition from there. I mean, I certainly feel that just the way that our communities are and what we have in Lincolnville currently partnering in this coalition is, I think, a really solid way to move forward in this conversation.
Do you think it's relatively safe for Selectman Garrettson and I to say that our at least preliminary goal is for fiber to the home, meaning to the building, and that I'm just basing it on what Susan said, that 100 or 100 symmetrical ought to be the minimum we're all shooting for. Or
I certainly agree with that.
I mean,
yeah,
at least it would be for lack of a better word, a starting point for discussion.
Yeah.
And if 90% of the other communities or all the other communities say, oh no, we think it means this, at least we'll have had the discussion. And otherwise, no offense to Selectman Garrettson or anybody else, we're all flying blind going to this meeting and just, I don't want to say making stuff up as we go, but it's more reactive to somebody else's versus saying we've had a discussion and at least on a preliminary basis, this is what we're thinking.
Yeah.
Something out on the table for maybe others to react to versus us reacting to somebody saying, oh, 25-30.
Yeah.
I prefer that we lead the dance, as they say, because at the last meeting, it was everyone, no one had a strong stance. And so if we just say, this is what Lincolnville thinks, then you're right. They'll react versus us.
Yeah. Mike, you had a.
Okay, so David, Josh, while you're dancing out there, maybe if you could push the idea that we tend to, we think that universal access is important and that people are not left behind. And so if your partner mentions, well, those people out of Molyneux Road or wherever, that's kind of tough to get there. We'll get to them later. You might want to say no up front. Getting everyone connected is important, even though it may be an incremental pay-as-you-go process. That the end plan is to have everyone connected.
Paid for by the utility. Let me just make sure we all understand that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I mean, the more we talk about it, the more it really is in keeping with all the conversations. Replace internet with any other widget that we talk about, is that it has to be a service that works for everyone, because everyone who is living here in town is contributing in whatever way that they can contribute, some with more challenge and some with less. And so it seems like a reasonable filter to apply to this conversation. Yeah. Well, great. Good luck in your upcoming meeting. I hope it's productive. And certainly it seems like the conversation's going to be heading in the direction, and thanks, Josh, for volunteering to be on that subcommittee. But eventually policy is going to be made. And this board may want to look at making, I know we sort of made like interim appointments of having our town administrator and Josh, but it may make sense to form some other kind of charge for participation so that we don't put our town administrator in an awkward position when it comes to setting policy. So is there anything else on broadband for tonight?
Yeah, I know we want to wrap this up. However, I want to say, let's not forget that what Susan mentioned about getting the broadband committee back up and running. We may want to get that on a future agenda.
Yeah, I didn't understand that she meant that we needed to have one in Lincolnville specifically. I understood her to say if you have an active regional effort, and if you don't have an active and cohesive regional effort, for example, if it seems like our goals are divergent from the regional effort, then having a local effort makes sense.
Well, that's funny. That's not what I heard. We heard different things, I guess, because what I heard was that even if you guys do decide to go a regional, you're going to want a home-based broadband committee to advocate for and educate the community. I'll watch the tape again. Maybe I got that wrong. Yeah. David.
Well, yeah, I was trying to listen to, that was my takeaway, but regardless, I feel like the board coming back together and listening to what happens in this next regional coalition will be informative.
The other thing I wanted to bring up on that subject, excuse me, and perhaps Selectman Garrison and I can broach that subject with him Wednesday, is a couple of the communities that are involved have, for lack of a better word, gotten rid of their local committee because they joined together as a committee. But we may want to consider having, for lack of a better word, a feeder group that comes up to, whoever serves on the broadband coalition. Obviously, you're not going to send 15 or 20 people from Lincolnville to a Zoom meeting for the broadband coalition, but it may ultimately be good to have a sounding board to bring it back to spread it out. And I think that could be certainly discussed with the group too, because I think other communities will want the same idea.
Sure. Okay. Good. Well, this will certainly not be the last time we talk about this.
I think so.
Moving on, we have Richie Osgood, who has been very patiently waiting.
Yeah.
And I apologize to him and thank him for his patience. And so while David brings him over,
Coming.
Are you with us, Richie?
I am. I'm just trying to figure out what buttons I need to push.
Got it.
I think you got it.
Nicely done.
There you are.
All right.
Last time I did no idea how to turn the camera on, so it was audio only. But I ain't
You
too
have
crazy, so
advanced.
we're all set.
That works too. Well, the floor is yours, Richie.
All right. Well, I guess it's more of a explanation on why I'm here again, because I don't know if you remember, I was in front of you September, October, and supposedly I was going to be put on the list for discussion for the November overview by you of qualified inspectors, and I don't think there was any discussion of me or why it didn't happen. So I guess that's where we start.
Sorry, was that a question?
Yeah, I guess that's where to start. I guess I need some clarification on where we go from here, why we're back here again, requesting to be put on the list.
Yep, fair enough. I think the long and the short of it, well, the short of it is there was a little bit of overlap in terms of timing. And the board had not yet really discussed what a qualified mooring inspector was. And so that was part of the conversation that happened in between then and now. And I'm pretty sure David gave you the updated information in terms of how the Harbor Committee and the board are defining a qualified mooring inspector, of which you certainly fit the bill, with the added exception, or not necessarily exception, but having appropriately defined and up-to-date liability insurance on file with the town. And I know you have insurance on file with the town for the other work that you do for us. And so I guess my question back to you would be, does that certificate of insurance, would that specifically cover you to do mooring work?
I guess in my reply to that, have you vetted anybody else on your current list, whether they have insurance that covers that?
Well, that's a whole other conversation, but we're working on covering the various gaps that were left in the record keeping up to this point. But, you know, the expectation is that everyone and anyone that is on the qualified mooring inspector list would be able to fit those criteria. But since we're having
you haven't asked anybody.
Well, we're having a conversation with you right now, so we're not talking about the rest of the list.
Okay, well, what my point is I'm not on the list because, first of all, wasn't requested to prove anything. Whether, you know, when I was talked about being on the list, it was never, well, you know, submit this and, you know, this is what we need. And then I turn around and I look, well, did anybody else submit it? And the answer is no. Was anybody else asked? No. So as far as insurance, I have contractor's liability that covers Richie Osgood and Son, of which I am owner of. You do have on file, I believe, a $2 million contractor liability policy that covers Richie Osgood and Son. And it's a policy I've had for many, many, many years. And it's, you know, a record that the town does have that policy. So I guess we're back, you know, we're back to that. So I need to get a hold of my insurance agent and ask if Richie Osgood and Son inspects a mooring, if my contractor's liability is going to cover that.
Yeah, I think if we just have a updated certificate of insurance on file with regards to moorings, no problem. You know, I mean, I hate that you're taking it personally, but I think it's really just a matter of the board getting square on what the definition of a qualified mooring inspector is and in these conversations. So it really isn't anything personal.
At the time of your discussion on the mooring list, which I should have been on the list, at least for discussion, you could have said everybody but Richie for this reason. I would like to be judged exactly how everybody else was judged at the time of your discussion in the November meeting, and not singled out.
You're not singled out. You're applying post the board approving the list. So
but the list is renewed every year. So basically everybody is applying every year.
Correct.
So there you go. I would like to be judged based on the same guidelines that the rest of people were.
So the criteria, the one thing that you're missing is an updated certificate of an insurance that will say that you're covered to inspect moorings.
Okay, let's pick on somebody on the list. Toby Winkelhofer, did you request an updated insurance policy from him last November?
You're not Toby, and you're not are you applying on Toby's behalf? Or are you applying?
No, I want to be judged on the same merit that everybody else was requested. Was any other companies requested to prove current insurance?
The Board of Selectmen have established a policy by which people are added to the list. You're looking to be added to an existing list, and the criteria is that you have the skills, the knowledge, the professional capability, and an up-to-date certificate of liability insurance.
Okay, so next year I won't be requested to prove I have insurance.
Once you're on the list and you maintain your insurance, sure.
Was anybody else asked if they've maintained their insurance?
They will be. We're certainly, yeah. Josh, what?
And I just, my understanding from our requirements is also to have an active dive license. Do you have an active diving
No,
license?
no. It's and/or equipment to raise
Yeah.
the equipment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have set all of my moorings. I've maintained all of my moorings for going on 3 decades.
It's great. All you have to do is bring back your certificate of insurance to us, and then I can't imagine anyone on the board denying you.
Well, can you guys make, first of all, I hate bugging Dave. I've chewed his ear at a ridiculous amount over something extremely silly. And this is very silly. I hate tying him up like he's doesn't have more important things to do than deal with some crusty fisherman about a mooring. So is there any way a motion can be made and seconded that you will be on the list and it will be active once I show this piece of paper from my insurance, so we don't have to go on the agenda again? I don't want to waste any more people's time.
You're not wasting.
I would think that a motion could be made and seconded that you are on the list as long as you provide this piece of paper that I'm asked to require. I mean, I don't want to sit through another 3-hour meeting. 2 months from now, I need to get this rectified. I've been trying to get this straightened out for over 6 months.
I can certainly appreciate your frustration. However, all we'd have to do is you'd have to, have your insurance company fax to the town office, and at our next meeting, we'll pop it on the agenda. You don't necessarily have to participate if the board can be in concurrence, that you don't have to sit very patiently while we talk about other business. But, I don't want to speak for the board, but I think that, if you provided that to the town office between now and then, you certainly have ticked all of the other boxes. And
yeah,
we certainly,
in the future, are you going to require everybody else that's on the list to prove what I have to prove?
Yeah, Richie, I think you probably know that, there's a few things that needed to get straightened out with how things were done and how records were kept and how certain things happen. And so the board is certainly efforting towards just standardizing everything so that
I understand, but I know, and I'm going to pick on Kurt because I remember what he said. Someone asked Kurt in one of the meetings, Kurt, if your company you represent inspect a mooring and 2 months afterwards it fails, is your insurance going to cover that? Do you remember what his answer was?
Not necessarily. They'll go after the person whose boat.
Said absolutely not. So for you in general to require somebody to have insurance, that at the end of the day doesn't mean a damn thing, because it's not going to cover anything. And you've got a boatyard representative that said our insurance isn't going to pay for that. Why do we need to have insurance when it's not going to cover it anyway? And at the end of the day, the owner is responsible for his vessel and the damage his vessel does if it were to break free.
Yeah. Jordan, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, I think it's maybe seems more complicated than it should. It's just, it's the agreed upon standards, and all you have to do is show us the insurance, just like everybody else has to, because it's the bare minimum required, and you'll be in like Flynn, my friend. It's not that hard, and everybody's got to follow the same standard.
I understand, but my point also is nobody else has had to prove anything. And I'll prove, I mean, that's fine, but I want everybody else to be asked. That's only fair.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, and I'll chime in because I was the guy that made the initial list for this year. you're a bit of a victim of circumstance, and I think this is a work in progress, like a number of issues there are.
I can understand that.
And the process that will likely be used in the fall of this year is going to be different than what it was in the fall of last year, which was different than the fall of the year before. But if you want to be on the approved list of qualified mooring inspectors for this year, I think you've got a simple avenue to get there.
Could you, I ask one more favor of you, could you email exactly what I need to ask my insurance agent?
Not a problem.
Okay, that would help me. And like I've told you before, and I want to say it publicly, I hate you've had to waste time on this ridiculous.
No, it's not. It's not a waste of time. I'm doing my job.
Richie, it's not a waste of time at all.
Well, it's silly, but anyway, I just wanted to apologize publicly that I've burned David's ear. But of course, he's has always been very professional, of which everybody knows anyway. So
Yeah, well, we certainly appreciate you, sticking with it, and, please bear with us as we try to kind of untangle a bunch of knots.
yeah, it's unfortunate. I'm going to speak as a fisherman now, not for me, but as a group. I think there's a little bit of resentment telling a fisherman, leave me out of it. I mean, I've been almost 30 years, but in the scheme of things, I'm a new kid here. As far as some of the fishermen have had twice the years on the water that I have. And it's almost an embarrassment, I would think, to them to all of a sudden be told, well, you're not good enough to check your gear anymore. And I think that's a little bit of a slap in everybody's face, not just mine. I'm sure you're aware of most people that have vessels and people that work vessels. That's a member of their family. They're not gonna take shortcuts and want to see their baby on the beach. There's nobody in that harbor or in this world that cares more about my tackle than me. And so I think some people did take it to heart that all of a sudden we're not good enough to check our own gear anymore. Well, I built it. I mean, I picked out the granite. I bent the metal for it. I've replaced it over the years. I mean, I've had people hire me to go get moorings and drop them off down there. And, I think it made a lot of people upset when, oh, well, you guys don't know what you're doing. That's the way it was taken to me. So, I mean, I'm sure you can understand that I'm a little upset that this has even come around to require a fisherman that wants to take care of his own gear, or any professional commercial waterman. I mean, you've got people down there that are going to have to pay to have their mooring inspected that have been building moorings for 50 or 60 years. So I just want that point to come across, that it's kind of a slap in the face to professionals that make a living on the water to now have to turn around and either become certified themselves, which means getting a commercial liability that it's money. You're a small business owner, I'm assuming, with your husband, and every expense is an expense. Yes, it's a tax write-off. You've got to make the money somewhere to be able to spend it. And a lot of us have thought that this is another fee, because it is. It's another fee. It's something that I've always done. It's something that most of the fishermen have always done. And now we have to pay another fee. And then, and our fees went up 5% at the harbor this year. Our income last year was down. I mean, and now our fees are higher. Everything is a pinch. So that's a bone of contention to me, is if I was forced to hire somebody to do what I've always done for 30 years, that's a slap in the face. So I just want you guys to understand where some of the anger is, and you'll have to forgive us. We're captains. We're not necessarily the most good spoken people or can convey things without getting all bent in the head, but that's just the way it is.
Well,
Yes.
thank you for sharing that. And, you know, it's nice to get to have a conversation with you face to face, sort of digitally face to face.
Well, I put my hat on so there'd be no glare.
Any other questions for Richie while we've got him?
I just would like to say that, Richie, you know, I know you understand that we're going through a lot of changes, and I know you and I have had a conversation about this particular subject, and it's now on the table about what we can do to get you on the list. It is not a slap in anybody's face, but I will tell you that this information was recommended by the Harbor Committee. I don't know if you're a member of the Harbor Committee, but I
have read their meeting minutes from that.
Yeah.
I've watched most of the meetings involved with what was charged to the Harbor Committee and what they came up with for answers.
Yeah. So one of the things that I will say is you do convey yourself and you do present yourself very well. And I think meaningful input to the Harbor Committee, especially from somebody who's 30 plus years into something, would mean something to me. So I just would recommend more participation with them. We're relying more and more on the Harbor Committee as a steering committee, or at least that's how I see it. Although we do have the final say.
I think that a lot of the steerage from the Harbor Committee has come down from the Select Board. We want you to look at this, and this is kind of what we want.
And
in a
to
roundabout way.
And to make recommendations for us so that we don't get back into an unorganized situation like we just came out of.
Well, and the truth of it is that, you know, we're just looking at the ordinances and what the town charter and what basically the voters of Lincolnville have asked us to make sure happens. And just because it hasn't been happening for a long time doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been. And so we're trying to, we're just trying to straighten the ship up a little bit, I guess, because it's been kind of going around in circles for a while. So.
All right. So there's no, I guess part of my issue is, as well as you take a fisherman that has his own commercial mooring. If he doesn't have contractor's liability, he's never going to be able to inspect his own mooring. Is that the point of the board?
Well,
position of the board?
The policy that's been adopted, I believe you've got a copy of.
Well, what I don't understand is it takes a vote of the town to change an ordinance, correct?
Correct.
Did the town vote stating that we're going to require everybody to have contractor's liability to inspect their mooring?
Well, what you're speaking towards is you're speaking towards a certain amount of policy that is set by the Board of Selectmen that have been elected by the people. But what the ordinance says is that moorings shall be inspected. So the question that came up with the Harbor Committee and the Select Board is, how do we define that? Because, well, and we really can't get into it. We can't, you know, it's 8:45 and we still have quite a lot of work to get into, but.
I understand, but I hope you see my point.
I do. And, you know, and unfortunately we're sitting in the seat of being bureaucrats and having to set policy that works for everybody. And so.
And one more quick point, you might want to ask our town attorney. If my mooring, or excuse me, if Joe Smith's mooring breaks and his boat comes and wipes mine out, and it's proven that he didn't inspect his mooring or anything else, is the town liable for the damage? And I'm going to guarantee you, the town attorney is going to say, no, the town's not liable for the damage. Therefore, the risk to the town of requiring everybody to have contractors' liability, it's not a risk to the town at all, because it isn't going to come back to them. And with that, I will let you go and finish your evening. But I mean, it's just a point.
Yeah.
You're asking something that the town doesn't have any liability on. The town's not going to get sued if my boat breaks off and squishes somebody else's.
Richie, we appreciate all your thoughts.
I just rule by common sense, which isn't always politically correct, but I never claim to be.
And we'll look for something on our next agenda from you.
If David, if you could send me what I'm supposed to ask, and I'll get that back to you.
I will do so.
All right.
Great.
Have a great night, Richie.
We'll see you.
Thank you, Richie.
Okay. How's everybody doing? Only 6 more agenda items left to go. So I wanted the board to have a conversation regarding Zoom meeting protocols. There have been a couple of circumstances that have come up that prompted me to want to have the board to have a chat about this, seeing as how this pandemic is not going to be abating anytime soon, and we are going to be meeting remotely for this foreseeable future. And we did recently approve the rules of procedure for the select board to meet, and they're all fairly clear, and a lot of it comes down to just air traffic control. But we have this chat feature, which one of our viewers used several times this evening. And the circumstances that have come up is a member of the board engaging in a conversation with the chat while another conversation is happening. And I started thinking about that, and it effectively, not only is it out of sync with our rules of procedure in terms of board members interacting with the public, and board members essentially digitally interrupting each other. So I thought we should have a chat about that, and if anything comes up for anyone in terms of, do we need to do something differently? Do we need to adopt interim policies that address this digital forum that is sort of a new frontier for a lot of us?
Well, the way I take the chat feature is for the participants to be able to ask a question or ask to be recognized, not to communicate one-on-one, because I, for one, if there's a question and it should be discussed before there is an answer, I don't want anybody speaking for me. I know we get together on issues and we talk, and then there is an answer, which typically is either given by the chair, or if information is to be sent out, it's and correct me if I'm wrong, it's always sent out by David, by the direction of the select board. So I just, I'm good with participants like the public asking questions, but I don't think it should be a response by just one selectman. I think it should be brought up. It should be vetted and then answered. I think it's only fair, and I think that's the way it's most always been done. I know we're in different times with this Zoom thing, and it's tough. I can get myself in enough trouble without having somebody else answer for me. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah, lately, I don't know. I don't know exactly how the chat feature works. That is, what control as a facilitator do either you or Dave have over it? Can you just turn the button off so it isn't allowed?
Well, it's on, and if you look in the fine print before our agenda, it specifically says that the public can participate via the chat feature.
Okay.
And so it really, the intention, I believe, by setting that out is so that the attendees, who are essentially the audience, right?
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of them raising their hand and asking a question.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was getting to. I'm wondering if it's the case that whoever is facilitating, if you can prevent them from chatting until they raise their hand. And then once they are, just like in a classroom, once you're called on.
Right. Right. Well, and I had a conversation with Josh, and sorry, Josh, to throw you
Okay,
under the bus.
no problem.
But at our last meeting, Josh engaged with the chat feature and shared a couple of documents with the public. And, I didn't want to call notice to it because there was a robust conversation happening between one of our board members and the guest that was speaking at the time. And so I found it would be impolite to stop that conversation to address a secondary conversation that was then happening. But I wanted to get concurrence from the board because while, yes, I am the chair and it is my responsibility to make sure that there is a clear and transparent flow of conversation, I don't want to shut anyone down. Yeah. And so I feel that it is important that we as a board come to a consensus regarding the form and function of this chat. But my feeling is that, one, no member of the board should interrupt a conversation to have a side conversation with the chat, nor should any member of the board share documents or information that, one, wasn't part of the packet, or two, wasn't mutually agreed upon by the entire board. Because as you know, we are a board. We are not individual organisms once we are in this public forum. But I wanted the opportunity for everyone to offer their thoughts as well.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, I think this is great that we're having this conversation. Zoom is new this is a whole new world. And the chat feature doesn't exist in person. And so I have viewed it as, like a quick fact check tool, I guess, and like a quick share this or that. And I'm glad we're talking about it because we should all be on the same page on how we want meetings to be run. And so when Jordan was speaking with the people from LCI, one of them said something that I thought was factually inaccurate, and so I did a little fact check. And I thought that was more polite than raising my hand and interrupting. And then I shared the Broadband Committee report link, and then I said, I just shared this file. Check it out. And so I was trying to be helpful, but I certainly can understand that can be distracting, and that we didn't agree on me sharing that file. It's also tricky with FOA and with Zoom because when I share a file or we chat, I don't think that's in the YouTube stream. I don't know if there is a way to do this. I do think it would be good for us to save the chat.
We can archive the chat. However, in the spirit of full transparency, it will never be able to be part of the television stream on public access TV. And so for that reason, I'm going to advocate to the board that we really restrict how we utilize chat, that we keep it in the spirit that it was intended originally, of a way for the public to essentially raise their hand, ask a question of the presenter, ask a question of the board. And that, you know, I appreciate you not wanting to be rude and interrupt, but I think it almost would have been better if you had raised your hand and said, you know, I want to interject here. You can disagree with me, Alan, you know, who's speaking, but here's this, and I'd be happy to share this document with you later, you know, after the meeting, because, you know, I could see how it could get really messy. Really.
Absolutely. Yeah. If everyone if there were these whole long conversations happening between, I mean, it could be between two board members in the chat, and that could be problematic. But I think regardless of, I mean, even if the chat messages are just from the public, if we can, I think it would be good to archive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Because, you know, there are certain conversations or questions that come up from the audience that will be worth being able to go back and revisit. You know, I might make this suggestion not dissimilar from, you know, if there were an in-person meeting, that, you know, we leave it to our town administrator or a consensus of the board to reach out, or like any other flow of conversation, you know, if someone asks a question like I did tonight, you know, to say, you know, this question has been asked, to read it out so it's part of the minutes. Then it can become part of the conversation. And if the board wishes, maybe bring that person in to be a panelist as opposed to engaging in some furious chat.
Yeah, I thought you handled that very well. I think that was a good way to incorporate that.
So I guess the question to the board is, do we feel like we need to create some, you know, as David has suggested, create some interim policies that will die, hopefully, along with these virtual meetings, just to, you know, for future reference, not knowing how long this is going to go on for, so that there is a very clear understanding of how the board operates? Or what are your all thoughts?
I think we should have some basic guidelines. We don't know how long this is going to last. I'd be good with David creating a few things for us to read, I guess. Additional documentation. Sorry.
Yeah, Mike, you had a comment.
Oh, no, I was just going to say what Kern, just echo what Kern said. Yes, if David wants to put together something like that, I would appreciate it. And it would help. I mean, personally, what I would like to see is, I don't want to stifle any public comment whatsoever.
Right.
Or to prevent that from being archived and not being part of the record. However, I would like to see, maybe it's just because I'm easily distracted, I would like to see someone words not show up in chat until a person has been recognized.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And well, I don't know if it's fair or not, Laylee, because it puts a lot of burden on you and David and whoever has the controls to this.
Well, but I feel very much the same way, because I'm trying to, you know, it's one plate to keep spinning in the air, to fully engage in the person who's speaking and giving them that due respect. And then if you have someone who, I mean, it's, you know, I've been doing this long enough. It's like being in an in-person meeting, and there's someone that just is so excited they can't contain themselves and starts chirping from the back row of the audience. And sometimes it's really hard to contain yourself. But you know, in light of wanting to give that person the full respect of their ideas or questions, you know, I think you bring up a really good suggestion to consider.
Well, I was a while back, I was on a Zoom meeting that the Maine Municipal Association was doing, and they were able to incorporate chats, but we were all asked initially, and then periodically save your chats until a certain point, and then there'd be a point in the conversation where everybody would be invited or asked to bring it up. So, but I don't know what capabilities, I don't know how we could work that in.
Yeah, well, and certainly depending on the type of conversation that's being had, that could make sense also.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Jordan, do you have any thoughts or comments?
Similar. I just think they should be part of the minutes, and if there's a way that we can, like you said, forego answering things and maybe just bringing them to your attention, like saying, hey, there's a response in the chat, and then letting you take care of it. Like you said, I think it's really important that the comments and questions be a record, and it be included in the minutes too. So whatever way we get to that, I mean, I'm totally amenable, but like everyone else said, it's just super important that we let the public be involved in as many ways as humanly possible, and that they don't also feel like that they're sitting there forever with their hand raised, which is hard. But that's why I say, if somebody notices something, we could say, when it's time, hey, I noticed this, and then you can do what you do.
You're in the queue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, would someone care to make a motion to that effect then?
I move to have the town administrator prepare for our consideration at a future meeting a supplement to our current rules of procedure that would govern our remote meeting practices until such time as remote meetings are no longer allowed.
Second.
So moved by Selectman Late, seconded by Selectman Garrettson. Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson?
Yes.
Selectman Ray?
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker?
Yes.
And Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes, the motion passes. Thank you all for giving that your consideration. And David, would you like to talk to us about the photocopier options?
Sure. As we were preparing the budget in part of our research, we discovered that our lease we've been leasing our copier here in the town office. We discovered that our lease expired at the end of December. So the lease didn't expire. Our commitment to the lease expired, and we're graciously allowed to go month to month until we choose to do something else. And so we looked at some other options. We looked at whether or not to purchase our current piece of equipment, continue lease month to month, get a new lease from the same vendor, or lease from a different vendor. And it was or is much less expensive to lease from a different vendor for an equivalent machine, both in terms of copies and in terms of the monthly expense. And so before we went any further, thought we'd bring that up here and have a conversation, because we're obviously still in the throes of budget and we have a chance to save some money. So that's where we are.
I love it. Yes, Jordan.
Well, did I read it correctly that in one of the leases that there was an option at the end of the term of the lease to purchase the printer for $1?
Yes, that
Okay.
would be with the company, that Transco, that we're looking to lease this from.
And right now, we're already at the end of our lease, and the option to buy the current printer is $1,500?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone care to make a motion?
I move.
Oh,
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, buddy.
Okay, I move that the town administrator be authorized to sign a lease agreement with Xerox Transco for a black and white copier for the town office.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Ray, seconded by Selectman Barnett Parker. Is there any discussion?
I just got one question. David, no need for a color?
The color option, fortunately, we're doing, I think, less copies And I think as we move forward with electronic things, we'll be doing even less. The only thing we do in color now, well, not the only thing, primarily is letterhead. You know, if we're sending a letter, oftentimes we even send that with using the town seal in black and white. But for the added expense, I mean, granted, we have an expense when we buy toner for the printers, but it's just one more thing, and I think we'll end up generating more color and burning more copies just because we have the capability.
Okay.
That's just me. I'm, you know, if you said we wanted to color one, I'm not going to jump up and down and say, no, don't do it, but just doesn't really seem worthwhile to me.
Any other discussion? Seeing nothing, Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson,
Yes.
Selectman Ray,
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker,
Yes. Sorry.
and
Yes.
Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes, the motion passes. Thank you all very much. And moving rapidly along, we have the Town Administrator Employment Agreement. David, do you wish to speak on this at all?
Only if you want me to. I want to go home as much as the rest of you. I will say I do appreciate the fact that the board gave having performance evaluation as required by the previous agreement, and I look forward to continuing employment with the town of Lincolnville.
Yep. And I can confirm that the town attorney has reviewed it and is happy with it. And so I would be happy to accept a motion.
I
The Board
move.
of Selectmen. I move that the Board of Selectmen approve and sign the employment agreement with David Kinney, setting forth the terms of his employment as town administrator for the town of Lincolnville for the period of July 1st, 2021 to July 30th, 2024.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Garrettson, seconded by Selectman Barnett Parker. Is there any discussion?
I think he said July 30th, 2024. That needs to be June 30th.
Yeah, you're,
Sorry, June 30th.
you're right.
And
You're right. So amended and then seconded the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Any further discussion? David, thank you. And Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson,
Yes.
Selectman Ray,
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker,
yes.
Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes. Motion passes.
Welcome back.
And Selectman update. Selectman Late, what do you have for us?
I don't. I'm sorry. I don't have I got no words.
Where am I? Who are all these people? Selectman Garrettson, what do you have for us?
Nothing that hasn't already been shared.
Fair enough. Selectman Ray?
I'm with Kern. I don't have anything.
Okay. Selectman Barnett Parker?
Nothing to report.
Okay, and I also have nothing to report. We have the treasurer and payroll warrants to approve and sign.
I move that the board approve the treasurer's and payroll warrants.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Barnett Parker, seconded by Selectman Late. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrettson?
Yes.
Selectman Ray?
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker?
Yes.
Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes, and the motion passes. And prior to our last action of adjournment, we have an executive session that we need to enter into, and I will entertain a motion, please.
I move that the board enter into executive session pursuant to Title I MRSA Section 4056C to discuss the possible disposition of real property where premature disclosure of the information would prejudice the competitive bargaining position of the town.
Second.
Moved by Selectman Late, seconded by Selectman Barnett Parker. Is that you?
Yes, it is me.
Okay. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, Selectman Late, what's your vote?
Yes.
Selectman Garrison?
Yes.
Selectman Ray?
Yes.
Selectman Barnett Parker?
Yes.
Selectman Dunn, my vote is yes. We are now entered into executive session, and as a reminder to everyone, we will be leaving this and then clicking on one of the plethora of links that you got in your inbox.
We'll find it. Yep.
Everyone good? Thank you to our attendees for sticking with us, and have a good night, everybody. We'll see you in executive